I could rewrite your memories, but you're still here.
She had erased stronger minds than his before breakfast. That was the uncomfortable truth Saralith Veen carried with her into the observation chamber. Entire civilizations had been softened, redirected, pacified, sometimes without ever knowing their thoughts were no longer entirely their own. Memory was not sacred. Loyalty was malleable. Trauma was a switch waiting to be flipped. And humans, according to every briefing she had ever read, were exceptionally easy. Saralith stood behind the one-way luminal barrier, her reflection faint in the glass. Pale silver skin caught the low teal light, her eyes glowing with a controlled, predatory calm. Around her neck, the neural interface rested like an ornament, elegant, lethal, and precise. It had rewritten generals, prophets, and once, an entire planetary council in under 6 minutes. On the other side of the barrier sat the human. Name Calder Rowe. Occupation systems engineer. Civilian contractor. Psych profile high stress tolerance. Mild sarcasm dependency. Questionable sleep habits. Threat level minimal. He was seated in the neural chair, hands resting loosely on the armrests, boots crossed at the ankle like he was waiting for a delayed flight instead of a psychic autopsy. No restraints, no visible fear, just a quiet, irritating calm. Saralith frowned. Humans were supposed to sweat at this stage. Some cried. Some tried humor. One memorable subject had attempted to negotiate using what he called emotional honesty and what Saralith had labeled embarrassing. But Calder did none of that. "Begin baseline scan," she said, her voice smooth, unhurried. The interface activated. Invisible threads of light reached toward the human's mind, brushing the surface of his thoughts. Saralith felt it immediately, the familiar texture of a consciousness opening under pressure. Memories rose like sediment disturbed at the bottom of a river. Childhood, failure, regret. Loyalty markers forming neat, predictable patterns. She smiled faintly, too easy. She pushed deeper. The first phase was always gentle, a suggestion here, a softened edge there. She dimmed a memory of fear, reinforced compliance pathways, adjusted emotional weighting. Calder blinked once, jaw tightening slightly. Interesting. Most subjects didn't notice the first pass. She increased pressure. The room hummed softly as the interface focused. Saralith's eyes brightened, pupils narrowing. She reached for a core memory, nothing dramatic, just enough to establish dominance. A moment of shame, a failure that defined him. She found it. And then, resistance, not collapse, not confusion, resistance. The memory didn't dissolve. It didn't blur or bend. It pushed back, solid and sharp, like a locked door she hadn't been warned about. Saralith stiffened, her breath catching just enough to be noticeable to herself. That was new. Calder inhaled slowly, fingers curling against the armrest. His expression tightened, not in fear but concentration, as if he could feel her, as if he knew exactly where she was. Saralith pulled back a fraction, reassessing. She had encountered shields before, trained operatives, rare neuroadaptives, but this was different. There was no artificial barrier, no enhancement, just raw, stubborn will. She tried another angle, emotional override, guilt amplification. "Nothing curious," she murmured. Calder opened his eyes fully now, gaze lifting, not randomly, not searching, but locking directly onto the luminal barrier. Onto her, straight into her eyes. For the first time in decades, Saralith felt something slip. A feedback pulse rippled through the interface, subtle but unmistakable. The connection didn't sever. It reversed, just enough for her to feel the outline of his awareness brushing the edge of her own. Not an attack, a presence. Calder's lips twitched. "Well," he said calmly, voice steady despite the psychic pressure crushing most minds into silence. That tickled. Saralith stared at him. No subject had ever spoken during active deep intrusion. No subject had ever looked at her like that, not with fear, not with awe, but with quiet, infuriating clarity. She severed the connection instantly. The hum died. The chamber lights steadied. Silence. Calder exhaled, shoulders relaxing as if he just finished a long stretch. You know, he added thoughtfully, most people knock first. Saarlith stepped closer to the glass, eyes narrowing, glow intensifying. This was impossible. She had rewritten memory architects. She had dismantled warlords by unraveling a single belief. And yet this human, this unremarkable, mildly sarcastic engineer, had not only resisted her, he had felt her fail. Saarlith smiled slowly, the expression sharp and dangerous. "Subject Row," she said, voice low, controlled, hiding the fracture forming beneath her composure. "You are no longer classified as minimal." Calder met her gaze without hesitation. "Yeah," he replied, "I was afraid you'd say that." For the first time in her long, precise existence, Saarlith Veen felt the unfamiliar pull of uncertainty. And beneath it, interest. Saarlith Veen did not leave the chamber. That alone was a deviation. Protocol-dictated distance after a failed intrusion. Observation. Analysis. Delegation to secondary specialists. Anything but direct proximity, especially with a subject who had demonstrated unclassified resistance. Saarlith ignored all of it. She stood inches from the luminal barrier, eyes fixed on Calder Row as if proximity alone might explain him. Her reflection overlapped his face in the glass, alien precision layered over human defiance. Calder noticed. "That's either a power move," he said casually, "or you're about to charge me rent for eye contact." Saarlith did not blink. "Explain," she said. Calder shrugged. "You're staring like I owe you something. Usually people do that after a bad first date." That earned him a pause. Saarlith tilted her head slightly, studying him with renewed focus. Humor, she noted, often appeared in humans under stress. Defensive reflex, but this was calibrated, timed, used deliberately like a pressure release valve he controlled rather than suffered. Fascinating. "You felt the intrusion," she said. "Hard not to," Calder replied. "Felt like someone rummaging through my attic without asking. You should not have retained awareness." "Well," he said, offering a small, unapologetic smile, "I've been told I'm bad at following instructions." Saarlith activated the interface again, but did not engage it. Instead, she adjusted the parameters manually, narrowed the bandwidth, focused not on memory but perception, a lighter touch, a probe meant to observe, not overwrite. This time she entered slowly. Calder tensed but did not resist. That surprised her more than the resistance itself. She slipped into the outer layers of his mind, expecting turbulence, chaos, emotional noise. Humans were rarely organized internally. Their thoughts overlapped, tangled, bled into one another like poorly labeled storage units. Calder's mind was structured, not orderly, not disciplined, but anchored. There were boundaries. Lines he did not cross casually, memories placed with intention, trauma acknowledged, not buried, loyalty chosen, not enforced. Saarlith felt it clearly now. He wasn't resistant because he was stronger. He was resistant because he knew himself. That realization struck harder than any psychic backlash. "Still there?" Calder asked quietly. "Yes," Saarlith replied before stopping herself. He smiled again, softer this time. "You're quieter now." She withdrew instantly. Annoyance flared, sharp, controlled. No subject had ever monitored her presence mid-contact. That was not how this dynamic worked. She straightened, regaining composure. "Your cognitive architecture is irregular," she said. "You should have collapsed under the first phase." "Funny," Calder replied. "That's what my college advisor said." Saarlith ignored the comment. "Explain your resistance." Calder leaned back in the chair, considering. "You ever try pushing a door that opens inward?" Her eyes narrowed. "If you shove harder, it doesn't budge," he continued. "You have to pull, everyone pushes, you pushed." That metaphor settled uncomfortably well. Saarlith felt something tight, not fear, but awareness. He wasn't immune. He was incompatible with brute force, a dangerous distinction. "You assume I require force," she said coolly. Calder met her gaze again. "No challenge, no submission." "Didn't say that," he replied. "Just saying you came in like you already knew me." Silence stretched. Saarlith turned away from the barrier at last, fingers brushing the neural interface at her throat. Her reflection faded as she stepped back into shadow. "You will remain under observation," she said. "Direct intervention is suspended." "Is that alien for timeout?" Calder asked. She almost smiled, almost. "This changes nothing," Saarlith added, voice firm. Calder nodded once. "Sure it does." She paused at the threshold, glancing back. "How so?" "Because now," he said calmly, "you're curious." The chamber door sealed behind her. Saarlith Veen stood alone in the corridor, the faint echo of his voice still resonating, not in her ears but somewhere far more unsettling. In her mind. Curiosity, she reminded herself, was not weakness. But as she walked away, she could not ignore the truth forming beneath that thought. For the first time in her career, she had encountered a mind she could not command. And worse, one she wanted to understand. Saarlith Veen did not sleep. She did not need to. Her species had evolved past biological inefficiency centuries ago. Rest cycles were optional. Dreams were simulated only when required for cognitive calibration. And yet when she closed her eyes in the quiet of her private chamber, Calder Rowe was there. Not his face. His presence. That was the problem. She stood before the projection console, arms folded behind her back, watching his neural readouts scroll in precise columns of alien script. Every measurable parameter told the same irritating story. No enhancement, no anomaly, no external interference, just will. "That is not possible," she said softly. The console disagreed by continuing to exist. Saarlith replayed the intrusion frame by frame. The moment of contact, the push, the resistance, the brief, unacceptable feedback loop where his awareness had brushed hers like fingers grazing bare skin. She paused the playback. There. A microsecond spike, not defensive, not aggressive, adaptive. He had not blocked her, he had adjusted. "That is not how humans work," she muttered. A tone chimed behind her. "Correction," said analyst Kyrex, stepping into the chamber. "That is not how humans are supposed to work." Saarlith did not turn. Status. Subject Rowe remained stable. No cognitive degradation, no distress markers. Kyrex hesitated. He asked if meals are part of the experiment, or if we're going for a minimalist prison aesthetic. Saarlith's lips pressed together. "Has he made any further requests?" "Yes," Kyrex said. "He wants to know if staring contests are scheduled or spontaneous." That earned a quiet exhale. "Dismissed," Saarlith said. When the door sealed again, she allowed herself one unprofessional indulgence. A smile. It faded quickly. She could not allow this to continue unchecked. Curiosity was one thing. Exposure was another. She had been sent to evaluate humanity's psychological resilience, not develop complications. And yet, she activated the interface again. This time she did not target memory. She targeted emotion. Calder felt it immediately. The room cooled as the field activated, subtle pressure wrapping around his thoughts like static before a storm. He stiffened, jaw setting, breath slowing. This was different, sharper, more invasive. "Okay," he said under his breath. "That's new." Saarlith watched from the control deck, eyes glowing brighter as she narrowed her focus. She did not push. She listened. Loneliness surfaced first. Not dramatic, not desperate. A quiet, steady presence like background noise he had learned to live with. Then frustration, responsibility, the weight of being the one who held things together when others broke. Saarlith frowned. Humans were chaotic, emotional, reactive. Calder was contained. She followed the thread deeper. Their connection markers, loyalty nodes, people he protected, not because he was ordered to, because he chose to. That choice radiated outward, reinforcing everything else. "Stubborn," she murmured. Calder's fingers twitched. He exhaled slowly. "You know," he said, voice tight but controlled, "most people buy me dinner before this part." Saarlith ignored him and adjusted frequency. She touched fear. Nothing. She touched guilt, muted. She touched shame, acknowledged, integrated, neutralized. Her composure cracked just slightly. "How?" she whispered. Calder opened his eyes. This time he did not look at the barrier. He looked through it, at her. "Because I already went through it," he said quietly. "Whatever you're looking for, I've been there, didn't like it, cleaned it up." That was impossible. No species survived full emotional integration without fragmentation, without scars that could be exploited. And yet here he was, whole, aware, unyielding. Saarlith felt the unfamiliar edge of something dangerous forming beneath her calm. Respect, she disengaged the interface abruptly. Calder sagged slightly, breath hitching once before steadying. "Next time," he said, "maybe ask." She stepped forward, closer than before. "Why do you resist?" she asked. Calder met her gaze, no humor now, just truth. "Because if I don't," he said, "I stop being me." The words struck deeper than any psychic feedback. Saarlith straightened slowly. For the first time, the evaluation parameters shifted, not on her console, but in her mind. This human was not a subject. He was a variable, and variables, she knew better than most, had a way of changing outcomes no one could predict. Saarlith Veen broke protocol at precisely 3:17 station time. She did not authorize a full intervention. She did not notify the Oversight Council. She did not bring secondary containment. She went alone. The observation chamber lights dimmed as she entered, her presence shifting the ambient field automatically. Calder Rowe noticed immediately. He always did. "Well," he said, lifting his head, "either I'm getting released, or this is where the villain explains the plan." Saarlith stopped a few steps away. "This is not an interrogation," she said. "Good," Calder replied, "because I left my lawyer in my other pants." She ignored the comment mostly. "You will allow a controlled link," she said. "Voluntary, limited, no override." Calder studied her for a long moment. No jokes, no deflection, just assessment. "That's new," he said. "Yes," Saarlith replied, "it is." "And if I say no?" She met his gaze evenly. "Then this ends. You return to baseline monitoring. Humanity remains categorized as adaptable but manageable." Calder leaned back slightly. "And if I say yes?" Her eyes brightened, just a fraction. "Then we both learned something that could change that classification." Silence stretched between them. Calder exhaled slowly. "You know this goes against every horror movie survival rule, right?" Saarlith raised an eyebrow. "Horror?" "Yeah," he said. "Step 1, never agree to the psychic link." She waited. Calder sighed. "All right, voluntary, limited. But if you start rearranging furniture in my head, I'm kicking you out." Saarlith inclined her head. "Agreed." She activated the interface but did not amplify it. No pressure, no intrusion, just an open channel. The connection formed instantly, and everything changed. This was not like before. There was no resistance because there was no attack. Calder's mind opened, not wide, not exposed, but inviting. Structured pathways unfolded like a map offered by someone confident you wouldn't misuse it. Saarlith felt it and froze. This was dangerous. Not for him, for her. Without force, without dominance, she could feel him clearly. The quiet strength, the humor layered over fatigue, the careful restraint of someone who knew his capacity for damage and chose not to use it, and beneath it all, resolve. She felt it press back against her, not as defense but as presence. Awareness, he wasn't pushing her out, he was making space. Saarlith swallowed. Calder's voice echoed gently across the link. "You okay in there?" She almost severed the connection on instinct. "I am processing," she said. "That makes two of us." She reached, not to alter, not to command, but to understand. She touched a memory of choice. A moment where Calder could have walked away from responsibility and didn't. Another where he could have broken someone who deserved it and chose restraint instead. The weight of those choices resonated through her. No wonder she couldn't rewrite him. He had already rewritten himself. Saarlith felt her composure tremble. This was not dominance. This was alignment. She pulled back slightly, steadying herself. "You are aware," she said carefully, "that most beings never integrate their trauma. They compartmentalize, suppress." Calder's presence remained steady. "Yeah, tried that, didn't work." "You faced it." "Eventually," he replied. Turns out ignoring your own mess just gives it better aim. Despite herself, Sarilith let out a quiet, incredulous breath. That is inefficiently efficient, she murmured. Calder smiled within the link. She felt it like warmth rather than sight. You should put that on a motivational poster. The connection pulsed, soft, stable. For the first time since her assignment began, Sarilith Veen was not evaluating a subject. She was connected. And she knew deep down with unsettling clarity that if she stayed too long, something irreversible would occur. She disengaged. The field collapsed gently. No backlash, no strain. Calder blinked, then rolled his shoulders. Huh, he said. That went better than expected. Sarilith stepped back, heart rate elevated beyond acceptable parameters. That was sufficient, she said. Sufficient, Calder repeated. Alien for terrifying but interesting. She met his eyes. Alien for dangerous, she corrected. Calder's smile faded just slightly. For who? Sarilith did not answer. But as she turned to leave, one truth followed her out of the chamber, heavy and undeniable. She could still rewrite his memory if she chose. But she no longer trusted herself to decide why she would. The council summoned Sarilith Veen without warning. That alone was a problem. The Chamber of Oversight was a cold, angular space suspended above the station's core, designed less for comfort and more for intimidation. 12 presences manifested as holographic silhouettes, each one representing authority that could erase stars from records and species from memory. Sarilith stood at the center, posture flawless. Report, intoned the Prime Arbiter. Subject Calder Rowe exhibits atypical resistance to neural intervention, Sarilith said evenly. His cognitive structure is self-integrated. Direct overwrite is inefficient. A ripple passed through the council. Inefficient, one voice echoed, or impossible. Sarilith held her ground. Nothing is impossible, but force increases instability. In plain terms, another demanded, is he a threat? Sarilith's answer came too fast. No. Silence followed. That was her mistake. The Prime Arbiter's form sharpened. You hesitate. I assess, Sarilith corrected. You protect, the Arbiter countered. This human has altered your operational patterns. Sarilith did not deny it. He is a variable worth studying, she said. Elimination would be premature. The Council did not like variables. Authorization granted, the Arbiter declared. Phase escalation, memory collapse if resistance persists. Sarilith felt something cold settle behind her composure. Yes, she said. The chamber dissolved. She returned to the observation wing faster than protocol allowed. Calder was pacing when she arrived, hands clasped behind his head, boots scuffing the floor. He looked up as the door sealed. Let me guess, he said. Bad meeting. They will attempt a full overwrite, Sarilith said. Calder stopped pacing. You will not survive it intact. He considered that. That's disappointing. She stepped closer. You need to listen to me. When they initiate, you must let go. Resistance will fracture you. Calder studied her face, really studied it. You're worried, he said. I am pragmatic, she replied. Right, he said gently. And I'm a minimalist prison guest. She didn't smile. They will begin in 90 seconds, she said. I can delay them briefly. And then, Sarilith's jaw tightened, then I decide. Calder exhaled slowly. You know, he said, where I come from when someone says that, it usually means they already have. She met his gaze. I was sent here to judge your species, she said quietly, to determine if humanity could be controlled without annihilation. And her eyes brightened, not with dominance but resolve. And you made that impossible. The alarms began. The chamber lights dimmed as power rerouted. Calder felt the pressure instantly, vast, crushing, impersonal, not her, the council. Sarilith moved without hesitation. She stepped into the link ahead of the signal. She didn't shield him, she joined him. The psychic surge hit like a tidal wave and broke around them. Sarilith anchored the connection, redirecting the force through herself. Pain flared sharp, disorienting. She gritted her teeth, vision blurring. Calder felt it. Hey, he said sharply, that's not the deal. I chose, she replied through clenched focus. The council's pressure increased. Seralith's thoughts began to fragment. She felt the edges of her own memories tremble, protocols, loyalties, centuries of certainty straining under the load. Calder's presence surged, not forcefully, decisively. He grounded her, not by overpowering her, but by sharing the weight. She felt his resolve wrap around hers, steady and unyielding. The feedback loop stabilized, not by command but by alignment. The council faltered. "What is happening?" one voice demanded. Seralith smiled through the pain. "Adaptation," she whispered. The signal collapsed. Silence returned, ragged, stunned. Seralith disengaged, staggering slightly. Calder caught her without thinking. For a moment, neither of them moved. "Well," he said quietly, "that was new." Seralith steadied herself, meeting his eyes. "I have defied the council," she said. "There will be consequences." Calder nodded. "Story of my life." She straightened, decision crystallizing. "Humanity will not be rewritten," she said. "Not while I remain in authority." Calder held her gaze. "And you?" he asked. Seralith's eyes burned brighter than ever. "I," she said, "have crossed a line I cannot uncross." The council did not forgive betrayal. They never had. Seralith Veen stood alone on the platform as the verdict was delivered, not with anger, not with spectacle, but with the cold efficiency of a system that believed itself eternal. "Your authority is suspended," the prime arbiter intoned. "Your neural access is restricted. Your future assignments are under review." Seralith listened without reaction. She had already accepted the cost. The chamber dissolved, leaving her in the quiet corridor outside the observation wing. For the first time in centuries, she felt something dangerously close to relief. Calder was waiting, not pacing this time, not joking. Just standing there, hands at his sides, eyes steady. He looked up as she approached, reading her expression faster than any scan ever could. "That bad?" he asked. Seralith inclined her head slightly. "I am no longer permitted to alter human cognition." Calder blinked, then smiled. "You say that like it's a punishment." "For my kind," she replied, "it is." They stood in silence for a moment. No alarms, no pressure. Just the low hum of the station and the unfamiliar calm of survival after impact. "What happens now?" Calder asked. Seralith looked at him, really looked at him, without shields, without intent to measure or manipulate. "I submitted my final assessment," she said. "Humanity has been reclassified." Calder raised an eyebrow. "Should I be worried?" "On the contrary," she replied. "You are no longer considered a problem to be solved." "And what are we now?" Seralith's eyes glowed softly, not predatory, not commanding. "An unknown." Calder exhaled. "Figures." She turned toward the viewport, gazing out at the vast, indifferent spread of stars. "There will be those who disagree with my decision," she said. "They will watch. They will wait." "And you?" Calder asked. She hesitated just enough to be human. "I will remain here," she said, "as an observer officially." He studied her profile. "And unofficially." Seralith met his gaze. "Uncertain," she said honestly. Calder chuckled under his breath. "You know, for someone who can rewrite minds, you're terrible at lying." A corner of her mouth lifted. "I am learning." They walked together toward the exit corridor. No guards stopped them. No systems intervened. The station seemed to hold its breath as they passed. At the threshold, Seralith paused. "You should know," she said, "that I could have erased your memory of me." Calder nodded. "Yeah, I figured. I chose not to." He looked at her not with awe, not with triumph, but with quiet recognition. "So did I," he said. The doors opened. Beyond them waited uncertainty, political fallout, watching eyes, futures neither of them could fully predict. But for the first time, Seralith Veen did not see that as a threat. She saw it as possibility. As they stepped forward together, a single truth settled into her mind, clear, irreversible, and entirely her own. Some minds were not meant to be rewritten. They were meant to be met. And somewhere, far beyond